I'd like to share with you a 8.5-minute video this morning. I know. It's by Alain de Botton, or Alan the Button. He is a Swiss-born British philosopher and author. He is the founder of the London-based School of Life, which has a YouTube channel from which we will view this 8-minute video in the history of Wabi-sabi spiritual practice. He wrote the script, he narrates it, lovely British voice. His books include Religion for Atheists, The Architecture of Happiness, and Art as Therapy.
When it comes to what things look like, the Western world is obsessed by perfection, by symmetry and ideal proportion. This is a taste for beauty shaped by a reverence for universal laws, mathematics, and an appetite for the perfect and the eternal. Japanese aesthetics are, however, very different indeed, and the core of the difference is captured in a term for which Western languages have no direct equivalent, a term known as wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi refers to the beauty of the impermanent, the imperfect, the rustic, and the melancholy. It derives not from a love of invincibility, youth, and flawlessness, but from a respect for what is passing, fragile, slightly broken, and modest. Wabi-sabi believes that things are always more beautiful for bearing the marks of age and individuality. A trickle of glaze or a beautifully repaired crack on a piece of pottery are to be appreciated rather than made invisible. Wabi-sabi's history is intimately linked with Buddhism and its suggestion that wisdom comes from making peace with our transitory, imperfect, and unheroic natures. Kyushu, Japan, 1191. A monk known as Eisei returns to Japan from China with plans to create Japan's first Zen Buddhist temple. Zen presents a challenge to Japan's indigenous religion, Shinto. Zen offers a complex philosophical system which presents nature with its constant cycles of life and imperfect patterns as a focus of meditation and a lens through which to understand our own transience and emptiness. Zen will go on to be the philosophical bedrock of wabi-sabi. 14th century Japan. The meaning of two words, wabi and sabi, begin to evolve and become more positive than they had been. Wabi had originally meant the misery and loneliness of living in nature, away from human consolation, but its meaning now shifts to refer to an almost exquisite, bittersweet melancholy at being on one's own. Sabi, meanwhile, which had originally meant chill, lean, or withered, starts to denote the marks of aging and wear which can enhance an object. It refers to a positive impermanence and the welcome and noble signs of time. The ancient patina of a pot or a crack, beautifully mended, are now called sabi. Kyoto, 1488. Murata Shuko sits down to write a letter to his student Furuichi Choin. This document will come to be known as the Letter of the Heart and will define the ideal way that one should drink tea, the tea ceremony, and lays out the aesthetic of wabi-sabi. The tea ceremony had originated as a way for monks to stay awake in order to practice long periods of Zen meditation. But recently it's been overtaken by the ruling class of warlords or shoguns. They use it as a way of showing off expensive vessels and utensils imported from China. The tea ceremony has become flashy, often in elaborate and gaudy surroundings, and has slipped a long way from its spiritual roots. Now, Shuko redesigns the tea ceremony with the ideals of wabi-sabi in mind. The fashion at the time is to enjoy tea on a balcony while looking at the full moon, but Shuko claims that he has no taste for the full moon. Instead, he urges his student to appreciate the more subtle interplay of shadows on the half of the moon or the partially clouded moon. He also stresses that one should abandon the perfect and lustrous tea drinking cups of the Chinese, which seem to evoke the flawlessness of the full moon, and instead to commission more rustic ware from Japanese artisans, who will make little errors in the glaze and let these be a deliberate part of their work. Kyoto, 1582. Sen no Rikyu is summoned to the service of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a powerful warlord who unites the warring factions of feudal Japan. He commissions Rikyu to create a tea ceremony that can help to foster peace. Along with Shuko, Sen no Rikyu is revered in Japan as the father of the modern tea ceremony and the most perfect practitioner of wabi-sabi. A story that is most often used to illustrate the spirit of Wabi-sabi is taken from his life. One day, Rikyu asked a disciple to clean his tea house, and the young boy worked all day to scrub and sweep every inch of the house and garden. When Rikyu came to inspect it, he reached up and shook a maple tree overhanging the path. The sprinkling of leaves that fell brought Wabi-sabi to the scene. Thus, the man-made and the natural, artifice and random chance were united in a perfect expression of beauty and wisdom. Rikyu goes further than Shuko in undermining the high tastes of the shoguns and strips everything non-essential from his tea ceremony. The pots he uses are often directly taken from peasant environments or are modelled after a particularly rustic roof tile that he spots while walking through a local village. Rikyu also codifies the movements of the tea ceremony, creating the perfectly economical and graceful motions for preparing tea with a minimum of fuss, thereby adding wabi-sabi to the very core of the ritual. Unfortunately for Rikyu, his boss, the warlord Hideyoshi, comes from a peasant background and begins to fear that the whole process is maybe an elaborate joke at his expense. This causes him to order Rikyu to commit harakiri. In an eerie parallel to Socrates' demise, Rikyu holds a final tea ceremony among his closest friends before obediently stabbing himself through the stomach. Today, all the great schools of tea trace their lineage back to Rikyu, and all follow the motions and traditions that he set out. The maker of the humble tile that he so admired was known as raku, and raku pots are still made today and appreciated as the greatest embodiment of wabi-sabi. If you take tea in the Silver Pavilion in Kyoto, the birthplace of the formal tea ceremony in Japan, you can drink from the same cup as the troublesome Hideyoshi once sipped from. Edo, 1684. Matsuo Basho, the father of the haiku and Japan's most revered poet, sets off on the first of his great pilgrimages. These aimless wanderings will take him to the heart of solitude and nature and help him to capture the spirit of wabi-sabi in words. A depressive with a great talent, Basho takes joy in wandering the dangerous roads around Edo disguised as a beggar. Here he distills the fragile beauty of the sights around him into poetry that tries to spot the eternal through the fleeting moment. We can hear the beautiful desolation in one of his most famous haikus. Solitary now, standing amidst the blossoms, is a cypress tree. Ginza District, Tokyo, 2013. An enormous new outlet of Louis Vuitton opens, built by the Japanese architect Yun Aoki. 45% of all Japanese women are now estimated to own a bag by the French luxury goods firm, featuring Western ideals of shininess, perfection, and symmetry. Wabi-sabi is, like many traditional Japanese ideas, under enormous threat from the consumerist values of the West. Wabi-sabi is at one level an idea that relates to pottery, drinking tea, and the history of Japan. But at another, it's a lesson for all of us, for all times, because the place we really have to come to terms with imperfection, melancholy, and age is in ourselves. Wabi-sabi is a giant marketing effort which urges us to take a second look at what we might otherwise dismiss or treat with disdain. It recognizes that our tastes are not fixed, and that if someone with talent and artistic grace urges us to look more sympathetically at some moss, a slightly wonky teacup, or indeed the wise, wrinkled face of a friend or relative, we will be able to find charm and beauty here too. Our notions of beauty and interest are relative and open to change and improvement. With the ideals of wabi-sabi in mind, we may learn to find greater satisfaction in the humbler moments, in a walk down a slightly crooked path on an overcast autumn day, or in a less than blemish-free house, face, or soul. If you like our films, take a look at our shop.
For over 1,400 years, the Diwa Sanzan mountain range on the island of Honshu, Japan, has been a pilgrimage site. Carved into the forest floor of Mount Haguro is a stone stairway of, this makes my knees hurt just to say it, 2,446 stone steps up and down the mountain. The Yamabushi monks, who hold an interesting combination of Taoism, Zen, Shinto, and shamanism, can condense their philosophy with a single word in Japanese, Uketamo. Roughly translated, Uketamo, I accept the way things are. Uketamo is a wabi-sabi attitude that helps us embrace life's inevitable changes. The way of the pilgrim accepts the world as it is found. transient, and imperfect. Like accepting the physical challenge of the steep stairs, their spiritual acceptance of the way is also the path to inner peace. The pathway up and down the mountain is literally a walking meditation. It is not a penitential practice, for there is nothing in us that needs redemption or salvation. We are not sinners. We are not fallen. Uketamo is each step through the forest that embodies life's mindful journey. Though the mountaintop is a destination of sorts with its shrines and rituals, including standing underneath an icy cold mountain waterfall, this form of spiritual practice is actually a walking meditation. And with little metaphorical stretch, a bathing in the forest meditation, immersed in the forest's ambience and atmosphere, soaked in its strength and vulnerability, absorbing the feeling of being in the forest while experiencing being the forest. In Japanese, shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, is now in the West a form of ecotherapy. The bath is only a purification in the sense of ridding oneself of distractions and disappointments regarding impermanence and perfectionism. The spiritual practice of Uketamo is a way of life, a philosophy, an attitude, it's an outlook, it's a practice. The mountain climb, up and down the steep stairway, winding through the ancient forest, is not required to contemplate the nature of the way, which is experienced simply by being alive. Life is like the forest and the trees, always changing, impermanent, full of life and death. Not the banal cliche, it is what it is. Uketamo is a feeling arising from the experience of embracing acceptance, a mindful celebration that impermanence is the way of things. It is the way things are. One of the goals of spiritual exercises is to find and hold a psychic equilibrium, sometimes described as balance or harmony that enables us to flourish in our everyday life. The spiritual exercise of Wabi-sabi is about the pursuit of wisdom, not perfection. The Wabi-sabi attitude enables us to appreciate the wonder of everyday experiences of ordinary living. This mindful acceptance of impermanence allows us to appreciate the signs of the passage of time and the beauty of aging in ourselves and in others. The Wabi-sabi lifestyle embraces maturity and wisdom, whatever your age. It is an aesthetic attitude that posits a realistic standard of beauty that embraces the changes that come by simply being alive. The chips and dents of things are our own age spots and wrinkles. The distraction of perfectionism is what one tries to walk past in this spiritual practice. Perfectionism isn't about being youthful or being the best at any given pursuit. Perfectionism, it's the feeling that one can never arrive there, wherever there might be, of never feeling good enough, never feeling adequate. It is a grief at having lost forever the innocence and vigor of youth. Perfectionism is a harsh internal voice that belittles and chastises us. Accepting imperfection requires letting go of the weight that nothing I do is good enough, or even more debilitating, that I am not good enough. Abandoning perfectionism and finding self-acceptance along the way is Uketamo and Wabi-sabi. Psychologist Kristen Neff says, self-compassion is simply the process of turning compassion inward. We are kind and understanding rather than harshly self-critical when we fail, make mistakes, or feel inadequate. We give ourselves support and encouragement rather than being cold or judgmental when challenges and difficulties arise in our lives. Psychologist Jason Wu says, Shame can lead to avoidance. Avoidance perpetuates and reinforces shame and associated feelings of hopelessness and low self-esteem. Avoidance is often fueled by a belief that mistakes are irreparable, and it is better not to try. Repair helps us overcome shame. By separating from and deconstructing our shame, we can hear what it is trying to tell us. And self-compassion can help us remember that all people are fallible. It is only by being willing to make mistakes and learning from them that we can grow. Acceptance is a kind of compassion for your own and others' vulnerabilities and flaws. It's a kind of compassion that helps to develop greater flexibility in relationships. Appreciate the vulnerability that makes you human and the brokenness arising from the processes of loss and change that deepen wisdom and compassion over time. While you may see your own vulnerability as inadequacy, research shows that others' expression of their vulnerability is usually seen as courageous rather than weakness. Vulnerability enhances empathy and emotional intelligence. Feeling vulnerable and even broken is part of what it means to be an authentic human being. Embracing our own and others' vulnerability within healthy boundaries helps to build trust in our relationships. Spiritual practices like Uketamo and Wabi-sabi means nothing more than living your life in such a way that best realizes your capacities, actualizes your strengths, while also accepting our unique limits. The Wabi-sabi spiritual practice teaches us that all things, us included, are impermanent and imperfect. And here's the reality check: perfection does not exist. Imperfection is the natural state of life. It's just the way things are. The anxiety of failing to be perfect feeds the false narrative that we're not good enough, or blaming ourselves for the world's impermanence. This false narrative that is heard in the back of our minds is that we deserve our suffering or have somehow caused it. We have accepted, or have we accepted this false opinion and made it our own? Have we allowed it to define us? Do we chase the illusion of perfection thinking it will make us feel worthy and good enough inside ourselves and to others? Perhaps we need a new narrative, a new voice in the back of our head. Imperfection is not a compromise. Imperfection is the only way, because imperfection is the nature of things. In her book, Wabi-sabi, A Japanese Wisdom for a Perfect, Imperfect Life, Beth Campton writes, "Put simply, Wabi-sabi gives you permission to be yourself. It encourages you to do your best, but not to make yourself ill in the pursuit of the unobtainable goal of perfection. It gently motions you to relax, slow down, and enjoy your life. And it shows you that beauty can be found in the most unlikely of places, making every day a doorway to delight. All things in life, including you and me, are in an imperfect state of flux. So she asks us to strive not for perfection, but for excellence. Simply doing your best to be the best that you can be. For example, in your relationships, simply try to be the best friend you can be. In your creative work, strive to improve without expecting perfection. It is the Wabi-sabi acceptance of Uketamo. Human flourishing thrives through such acceptance. Philosopher-poet Omar Itani states, "Wabi-sabi is an elegant philosophy that denotes a more connected way of living. It is a lifestyle where we are deeply connected to nature and thus better connected to our truest inner selves. Wabi-sabi is a concept that invites us to search for beauty in imperfection and accept the natural cycle of life. It reminds us that all things, including us and life itself, are impermanent, incomplete, imperfect. Perfection then is impossible, and impermanence is the only way. The Wabi-sabi attitude of self-compassion repairs the psychic confusion caused by seeking perfection, which is not found in nature, because nature is always in flux, always becoming. Thank you.